Today we're going to be looking at complementary events when it comes to probability. In any situation, the probabilities of all possible outcomes must add to 1. So that includes all the probabilities of what is happening, plus all those that are not happening. Complementary events are events that together make up all the possible outcomes. For example, when we toss a coin, the possible outcomes are to get a head or a tail. The complement of an event, E, means all of those outcomes that are not E or that are the opposite of E. Because an event and its complement covers all possible outcomes, the sum of their probabilities must equal to 1. So that basically means that the probability of E, so the probability of an event, plus the probability of not the event, so any of the outcomes that aren't going to happen, must equal to 1. And so we use this formula to be able to calculate that. Sometimes you will need to calculate the probability of not the event, and therefore you'll be using this formula where it's 1 minus the probability of an event. Another way to look at it is the probability of a complementary event equals 1 minus the probability of the event. Or you could even say the probability of something not occurring equals 1 minus the probability of the event actually occurring. We're going to go through a few examples in a moment, but also note that if the probability is to be written in a percentage form, then instead of 1, we're going to be using 100% minus the probability event. The examples here says that on this spinner, what is the probability of spinning A, red, B, a colour that is not red, and C, a colour that is not green. So let's go through each example first. So let's do A. This says we need to figure out the probability of spinning a red. So let's have a look at the possible outcomes. So we have a red here, so that's 1, and another red here, 2. So our possible or favourable outcomes is 2 over the total number of outcomes, just like we've been calculating probability so far. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 possible outcomes. So the probability of getting red is 2 out of 6. We can simplify this fraction into 1/3 by dividing the top by 2 and dividing the bottom by 2. Let's look at B. It says a colour that is not red. So now what we want to do is calculate the probability of not getting red. So what we're going to do is use that formula that we discussed earlier. So as you can see here, we've got the probability of not red equals 1 minus the probability of red, which we actually calculated in part A. So the probability of getting red is 1 over 3. So when we're subtracting fractions from a whole number, what we're going to do is we're actually going to change this whole number into a fraction with the same denominator as the fraction that we're subtracting. So 1 could be rewritten as 3 over 3. So 3 over 3 is 1 whole, but when we now subtract our 1/3, we're able to do that because they both have the same denominator. So 3 minus 1 equals 2/3. So the probability of not landing on red is 2/3. Let's do one last example here. It says to calculate the probability of spinning a colour that is not green. So just like we did for A and B, we first have to calculate the probability of landing on a green. So let's have a look at our favourable outcome. So how many greens are in our spinner? Just 1. And what's the total possible outcomes? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the probability of landing on a green is 1/6. However, the question says, what is the probability of a colour that is not green? So this is our complementary event. So for not green, we're going to do 1 minus the probability of green, which is 1 over 6. And just like before, what we want to do is convert that whole number 1 into a fraction that has the same denominator as our probability of green. So 6 over 6 is the same as 1 whole. So now we can subtract the 2 because they both have the same denominator. So 6 minus 1 equals 5 over 6. So the probability of not green is 5/6. So as you can see, when we talk about complementary events, we're talking about the opposite of the favourable event. So for example, in part A and B, we're talking about not red, and in C, we're talking about not green. So make sure that you use the formula correctly by first calculating the probability of the event actually occurring, and then subtracting that from 1 to get the complementary event.